Welcome to the Hay Kings podcast, brought to you by Krone, dedicated to hay and forage producers. On this episode, I'm joined by Jeff Jackson with Cropland. We're going to talk about spring planting alfalfa today.
That sounds like a great idea. We're headed that direction.
I'm working on it. I have some oats to get in the ground first, but then I do have about 100 acres of alfalfa going in this spring.
Well, that sounds like we're going to have a great conversation, and we're going to get you all tuned up right here in one session. So that's
Yes.
great. That's good.
And we can help all the other producers out there. Now, I know spring planting isn't for everybody, right?
Correct.
There's particular geographies where it works. And for us, we can be 100 degrees in August, or we can have a frost in August. And it just makes it hard to get those plants in and be any kind of sure about 6 weeks before a frost. I mean, it just doesn't work.
You're absolutely right on that, man. There's so much geographical and demographic difference on who plants when and what their preference is and why it works.
And for us, it rains in the spring and generally not in the summer or early fall. So it's for us, it's about moisture.
Yes, you need to have, exactly. And that's usually what everybody talks about, is when they can get the most consistent moisture to get that stand up, active, growing, get some roots down, and then let it take care of itself to some degree. But irrigation plays a big role in that. Obviously, you guys can irrigate. You plant it almost whenever you feel like it.
Right.
So spring planted alfalfa. Here's something that we've been talking about recently. And this is all about hay. So here we are, spring of 2020, or winter of 20, what do you want to call it? Late winter? Because we're
late winter, early spring,
But we're 2024. The conditions have been really, really nice for a lot of people in a lot of the United States so far. We've got kind of this really warm early this year, and everybody's just itching and wanting to go, and where's the seed? And so we still need to remember soil temperature plays a big part in how we get some of these stands up and actively growing. And so I did a quick data search this morning again, just to refresh myself a little bit. But something I thought was very interesting is that alfalfa will actually germinate. This documented to germinate at 32, 33 degrees.
That's amazing.
So that's crazy. But at 33 degrees, it takes literally 15 days for up to 50% of those seeds to germinate.
That's very slow.
And we all know this. So other crops are the same way. We talk about germination rate at different temperatures, and if it lays there and it does germinate, it takes a lot of energy to get out of the ground at that point. And how much energy does it take? Are we going to have weak plants later on? You get up to 50 degrees, then it takes about 3 days for 50% of those to germinate.
That's dramatically different.
Oh, it is crazy. And then, of course, it says 60 degrees is better. And 70 degrees, believe it or not, is the most ideal temperature with the right moisture available to get everything germinated out of the ground the fastest. Boom, here you go. But most people are going to say, man, if I wait for a 70-degree soil temperature, I will have no moisture left.
Yep.
Probably.
Yeah, I mean, that's my conundrum here is if I wait for 70, bad deal. Bad deal.
Correct. So here we are today. There's a huge weather system moving across the upper Midwest right now again. And places I talked to this morning had 10 inches of snow.
We had snow over the weekend.
And of course, there are growers that knew moisture was in the forecast with snow as a high potential. And they decided to go ahead last week and seed alfalfa anyway, because they're going to have it in the ground and that snow is going to come, and their thought is it's going to melt really quick and warm up, and away things are going to go. So is that okay? After it's done, I can't tell you that it's not okay.
Right.
Would we love to have that alfalfa seed in the ground with warmer temperatures? Yes, because obviously we are in the 20s and under 32 degrees in some of those areas again today, and we're going to have snow on the ground. So soil temperature is going to cool off pretty quick, because let's just say, John, when that does melt, it's going to be like a really cold rain. So,
oh yeah, It's not going to increase the soil temperature. Not with that snow going in.
Going to set us back a few days. So the good thing is there's some people that still have seed in the bag. And, the other guys are like, well, it's not going to grow in a bag. Got to get it in the ground. Well, I won't disagree with that. But here we are. It's going to be a little bit too chilly for my liking. I told everybody else that if you can hold out to get this snow out of our system, get it melded in, get your alfalfa planted into some good moisture next week, get us some 60-degree days again, warm things back up, and away we go. So soil temperature would be one of those things that we always need to keep in mind. What we really need is to have somewhere about 30 days of decent growth before it gets too hot. We need to get that plant to get a root down, form itself into an annual plant, and then get going. But I have a set of topics that I always talk to people about, and I literally call it my major causes of seeding failure. So we're going to use that as a little bit of a guide today when we talk about how to successfully plant a spring-seeded alfalfa stand. Does that make sense?
Now, does this start with soil preparation?
So there's some soil preparation in there, and I think we just started the thing with soil preparation on temperature and soil preparation on moisture are two big things that really, really help. The alfalfa industry suffered the last, I would say, 3 seasons on the number of planted acres of alfalfa. And one of those culprits that factors into that would be dry conditions at the ideal timing for planting. So hopefully some of this moisture that people have been getting, or the guys with some irrigation, can get things off to a good start, because yes, that plant has to imbibe literally 100% of its weight in moisture to germinate. So it takes a lot of moisture relative to the seed size to get that all softened up and the seed coat cracked and everything. And here we go. Yeah.
Let's take a break there and we'll get a word from our sponsor. Livestock prefer palatable hay, and great bales require 2 things: high-quality crop and superior harvesting tools. Krone has you covered with the most reliable equipment so you can focus on the crop. Start your season with an added sense of security when you buy a new Krone. Now through May 31st, when you buy a new Krone mower, tedder, or rake, you can turn 1 year of warranty into 2 for free. See your local Krone dealer for details. Alfalfa seed needs to absorb 100% of its weight in water to get going.
Yes.
As I think about that, and one of the reasons that I start with that seedbed preparation thought process, nice worked ground is going to be darker in color, generally speaking, and will warm up a little faster. And then well-prepared soil. And what I'm talking about, that when I think about it, and tell me where I go wrong here, we're talking about a relatively small particle size where that seed is going to be surrounded by ideally wet dirt.
Correct.
To facilitate that movement of water from the soil into the seed. So that's why we talk about a small particle size of the soil and then a well-packed surface.
Absolutely correct. So for the people that are going to be doing conventional tillage, yes, if you can get that, and again, it's about, to your point, seed to soil contact. If we have large soil particles or dirt clods, if we want to go down that road, and it's cloddy and it's not nice and smooth and firm, then there's a chance that those small seeds will not have dirt touching it on every side, if you will. It'll be sitting in a little air pocket in that soil surface somewhere, and it can't absorb enough moisture fast enough if it doesn't have good seed to soil contact. So usually when we get done talking about seeding alfalfa, I reemphasize to people and say, did you hear me talk something about seed to soil contact? Because that's very important. And I might say that 3 times, 4 times, 5 times, because that's where we start to have problems. Yes.
Well, and I'll tell you, I've seen on several occasions where I've planted alfalfa or the neighbors have planted alfalfa, and you could see the tire tracks in the germination. And that's to say, in those areas of the field where the tractor tires ran over the soil. And now we're doing a video, and I can see the smile on your face. where the tractor tires ran over the soil, you got additional, and I'm going to use compaction in this case, but in all the right ways, where that tire firmed up that soil, and then the drill went over, or the Brilliant, or whatever you're using, gave that alfalfa plant a firmer, tighter seed bed to go into, and it actually pulls moisture up out of the ground, right? So you got a little bit of additional moisture, you got better seed to soil contact, and you see stripes through the field where the tires went.
Yes. There's a lot of things that go into that seed bed preparation and the firmness. And we just talked about moisture to some degree. I have examples where, and I'm going to use this little as a story, I guess, as we talk here, but I have an example of a dairy that, of course, they took corn silage off. They came back in and injected their manure from the pit because the pit's always full, and they deep ripped in the fall. Come back in the spring, field cultivated it, really nice, beautiful, open spring. Reminds me of much like what we're going through right now, which is kind of scary in its own right, because it is so dry in so many places, and the soil conditions are working up very, very well. So they took a big flat steel roller that a lot of farms will use to smooth out different things, push rocks down, the big rollers everybody has. Packed the field twice with a flat roller. Okay. They seeded it with a 36 foot Brilliant drill. So you get 2 passes with a roller, 2 passes with I'm going to call the cultipacker gang on that Brilliant drill, and they rolled it again after the Brilliant went. So it literally got touched 5 times with some type of packing mechanism.
Yep.
We had a beautiful 2.5 inch rain over a course of a day, or one of those 36-hour rains that you just sit back and go, oh my, that just happened. That was gorgeous. So I'm excited to go see this alfalfa field because it's a big flat quarter section. You couldn't have wrote the script any better, right?
Yep.
Well, there's one thing that we missed. It was so dry when they went across it to do the seeding.
Oh no.
That there was not enough moisture to actually hold the dirt like somewhat firmed up. It was just like, imagine, so we've all seen a feather pillow, or you've got one of these really nice down vests or a coat, and you could smash that into a tight wad, but when you let go, what happens?
It just goes poof.
It expands right back out. So literally, we talk about seedbed preparation. If you walk across that field and you sink in deeper than the sole of your shoe, it's too loose and you need to make sure it's firmer. Well, this field had 2 inches of rain on it, and I walked across it with steel-toed shoes, and I sank in almost 4 inches as I walked across.
Oh no.
So it was one of those moments where you're like, how in the world could this ever happen? And as you start to think backwards at how the soil conditions were when that field was established, you go, oh, it was so stinking dry that we made it look pretty. We made it look really pretty, but we didn't firm up anything. So I use that as an example when I talk to guys, and I've actually got some photos of it that are, I mean, let's just say I did not need to use any tracking device to get my way back out of the field because my tracks were very evident. I could just follow backwards. It was kind of an ugly day. Now, over time, it was one of those where the weather caught up and we did get some nice moisture. But at that point, the seed to soil contact was horrible. The seed bed preparation we thought was ideal and perfect. We overlooked the fact that somebody should have got out of the tractor and walked that field before they said it was good. And it's too fluffy.
And they got to do that again, didn't they?
Yeah, well, I'm going to tell you that as much as it pains me to say, as I gave that horrific example, they did get enough moisture throughout that spring that as we would all agree, you can almost do everything wrong in the world, but if you get enough water, it helps.
Yep.
So it did kind of come out of it, and it was pretty good. We did not reseed that field. It was questionable, but, with the input costs and machinery and everything else, they chose not to that year, and it probably got rotated out a year sooner than it should have instead of spending the extra expense.
Right.
Examples are, and once you do it or you see it, you go, oh, yeah, that's right. But to your
So
point,
in that case, they would have been better off waiting until after that rainstorm,
it,
letting it dry just a because that sounds like a lot of rain to me. Letting it
oh
dry
yeah,
just a little bit and then packing it with some moisture in it.
it probably would have been beneficial long term, but at that moment, it all felt right. It looked good. Uh, but to your point, I've been called to many, many fields where they'll tell me, man, this stand just really looks bad. I don't know. And I don't want to say that the seed industry would not ever have a bag of low germ alfalfa that might make it out the door, but knock on wood, chances are very, very high that the germ on that seed is going to be good enough that you shouldn't have to call me and say, man, there's something wrong with the seed. It's usually something with the environment or a management tactic that literally does have
And
a poor stand establishment piece.
we talked about this in terms of the seed count per pound and how many pounds per acre you
Yeah.
actually need if
Yeah.
everything worked.
Yeah, you could probably do about 4, and it would be outstanding if every seed came up in perfect conditions. Yes.
Yeah, we're planting 3 and 4 and 5 times that much commonly.
Commonly up to 6. Yes.
Oh,
And
boy.
anymore. So that's another really interesting discussion that a person could spend a lot of time on would be planting rates, because you'll have, depending on the part of the country you're in, 15 pounds.
Mhm.
You might find a study that says 12 and a half pounds would work fine.
Mhm.
I think the other part that we forget is there are all these other things that happen that might cause an alfalfa stand not to fully establish. And it's, you get too shallow, you get too deep. You have some bugs in the system. I mean, literally bugs.
Yep.
And then you might have soil diseases. And I was just looking at some stuff the other day too, where when you look at a tech sheet, John, and it says that something is highly resistant to a soil disease,
Mhm.
you know what percentage that has to be considered highly resistant?
No.
51% or greater. So,
Oh.
as a standard, you could have a tech sheet that says it's highly resistant to disease X, Y, and Z, and HR means that 50% or greater would be tolerant to that disease in the soil. So when those things come about, and you might have a nasty environment where some of those diseases are present, then all of a sudden we just took away half of the viable seed potentially in that bag, and some got too shallow and some got too deep, and there's some bugs that got on some. And so now we're at 18, 20, 22, 23 pounds of seed. Yes.
Oh.
So when you start thinking back at all the weird things that can happen, and I know that we're digressing a little bit off of the spring planting, but that's something for people to consider too, is that stuff happens. And we do have soils in the US right now that have gotten enough soil diseases and changes in the disease complex that they almost threw in the towel and said, until we get better varieties, we can't plant alfalfa anymore, because we plant in the spring when it's cool and wet and disease A, X, Y, and Z are present, and the current alfalfa, and they're changing.
Mhm.
Just like everything else in our world, there's a shift in pests, there's a shift in weeds, there's a shift in diseases. So you got to continually try to be ahead of it. Sidetrack a little bit, but that's why we do some of the things we do planting wise.
Now, okay, we made it through that seed bed preparation. We made it through the seed to soil contact. A nice firm seed bed is the right answer. Now
Very good firm seed bed.
Now, and again, if the sole of your boot goes below the surface of the soil, pack it again before you plant it.
And if you're one of those people that you're trying to do the grounding thing and you're not wearing shoes, then it would be, if it goes over your pinky toe, it's too soft. So
grounding. Right. I don't think I walk barefoot through my fields. Okay. Now you were talking about too shallow and too deep on that seed placement.
I would tell you that generally, folks, we want to try to hit a seed depth of about 1/4 to 3/8 of an inch deep for alfalfa. And that is because we are a very small seeded crop and we need to get out of the ground. That would be on an average textured soil, maybe a little bit tighter clay type. If you get into some sand, you're short on moisture, you get a sandy loam, maybe you could go a little bit deeper, ½ inch or so. Try to get yourself into some moisture so you can get out of the ground and have a healthy plant. I've seen a chart that shows us about planting depth and how many seeds or what percentage you should expect to get out of the ground. And the deeper you go, the less plants you expect to have, period. And the chart stops at 2 inches.
Oh, good grief.
So somebody's done it, right?
Right.
And actually, I have stories about we should extend the chart another ½ inch or so. And that's about, again, seed bed preparation. If you have a really loose, light, fluffy soil and you're out trying to drill per se, and you don't have your drill set right, first of all, you're going to sink too far because it's light and fluffy. And secondly, you're going to sink too far because your depth control is not appropriate. Mm-hmm. And I have seen alfalfa planted in excess of 2.5 inches. And it struggles. We talked about having 15 days to get that much seed out of the ground at 32 degrees. Well, it took about 28 days to get it out of the ground from 2.5 inches deep. I'm just saying.
Oh, geez.
Let's take a break there and we'll get a word from our sponsor.
What's up, Hey Kings? You have a lot of choices when it comes to sourcing your equipment parts, but have you tried Messick's? We have $20 million in equipment parts on our shelves, and we pick up from C&H Parts Depots daily. All this inventory is available with same-day shipping with no upcharges or expediting fees. Messick's.com has exclusive features like transparent pricing, photos of parts, fit verification, alternative part options, and an obsolete part search tool alongside the manufacturer's drawings so you're not guessing at what you need. We cover all the top brands, including New Holland, Case IH, Kubota, Krone, and Peckaway, and more, all from our website. Our online tools are backed by 60-plus parts professionals who are just a call away, ready to find even the most obscure parts. So whether you're a seasoned farmer or a weekend enthusiast, think Messick's for a convenient and professional part shopping experience. Visit us at Messick's.com or call our parts hotline at 877-260-3528.
Messick's, a helping hand with your land.
Now, last year, I had a situation where we planted into good moisture. We rolled it, air seeded it. I don't know that I'm going to go back to air seeding, and here's why. We had that beautiful corrugation, like that corduroy soil texture that's absolutely perfect. And we blew the seed on, and then we harrowed it lightly to cover the seed, and we packed it again. The only seed that germinated in the first 2 weeks was the seed at the bottom of the corrugations, because that's where the moisture was. Now, the neighbor down the road, he used a drill, and all of his seed came up perfectly in one go. We got 3/4 inch of rain 2 weeks after I planted, and all that seed in the top maybe 1/4 inch germinated, so I got 2 different germinations. And it made for a really funky, panic-stricken... the field was looking funky, and I was panic-stricken.
Absolutely.
Now, I think where you're talking about that 1/4 to 1/2 inch, if you're a little drier, it's okay to go a tickle deeper.
Yes.
And that's where that drill comes in. Now, if there's 2 weeks of rain in the forecast, blow it on, pack it in, and go.
Almost anything can work. And that's where I get into the discussion. So we all are aware that there's some beautiful drills in the industry that was made by a company called Brilliant, right? And they got these beautiful cultipackers on them. So you can get that crumbler up front, get everything sized down pretty good. You can get you have a very good metering mechanism to get everything evenly distributed across the whole width of your span. And then you have this beautiful cultipacker on the backside to poke them in on top. Mm-hmm. And I really love the Brilliant drill. And I'm going to use one caution statement. I've actually joked with some people recently and said, hey, how many people have Brilliant drills? And the guy raised his hand and I go, oh, okay, so do you also own a boat? And they look at me funny and I'm like, because the Brilliant drill would make a good boat anchor. And they get kind of crabby with me. And I'm like, I'm just kidding with you. But I've had some panic moments like you just said, or some moments of heartburn with Brilliant drilling because of we are trying to cultipack in the seed after it has been laid down. But when you go walk across the top, it seems like, or it feels like we see 20, 25, almost 30% of the seed that we just put out there, you can still visibly see.
Too shallow.
So I feel too shallow. And some of my examples would be this. You get these nice fields that they lay fairly flat, but they're kind of swaley, and you get these little high spots in them every now and then. We brilliant, we get a shot of moisture, things start germinating. And then you get that day where it's 75, 80 degrees and the wind blows 40 miles an hour, and everything that's shallow on top dries up, and now we've reduced our stand.
Mm-hmm.
And we really didn't even get a good start. So I really like the Brilliant works amazing, and I don't want anybody out there listening to say, the guy thinks Brilliants aren't great.
Right.
They are great. Where they have issues is where we get too shallow with so much of that seed, and we get germinated and then they dry out. Because then we have to fix and repair what
the
didn't
dead
make
spots.
it.
Yep.
And when we use a row unit, as you just said, and we put stuff in the ground a quarter to a half inch deep, they don't have the same issues about drying out as quickly if you get that breeze on those days. So I've done alfalfa seeding probably 17 different ways to Sunday, and you know how that goes. First of all, I farmed myself. I lived on a family farm for 19 years, and I've been in the agronomy system for 20. So I've seen a lot. And under the most ideal conditions, everyone will work.
Yep. With
like
enough rain, everything works.
Throw it on top and harrow it in. It'll work if you get the right moisture and everything was firmed up ahead of time.
Yep.
You have a light, loose, fluffy soil. And I'm a huge believer of having almost every seed bed firmed up before you go out there with any seed. I don't even care if it's a Brilliant. I'd still love to see everything's crumbled once so that you know. I have actually seen fields that were so loose and dry, John, that they pushed dirt ahead of the front gang on the cultipacker.
Yikes.
So that's dry. When you start pushing a wave in front of the packer, it's pretty dry and it's pretty loose.
Yep.
So if you can do something ahead of that, that's great.
I have an old Bearcat cultipacker. It has the crow's foot crumblers on the front, and I like that because it gets you packing deeper down, so
Sure
you're
does.
not just firming the surface. And then on the back, I have the smooth rollers. And I now again, we've all done this a couple of different ways, but that's my packing tool of choice is that Bearcat cultipacker. And then you can set the tines to just barely tickle the ground and knock down the high spots, and it works.
Absolutely.
And what I'd really like is a rod weeder. Oh, maybe that's a West Coast thing. But just a bar going across the tips of those tines just to smooth things out and knock down high spots.
Sure. No, absolutely. And even with the guys doing the Brilliant drill action, I did a couple of plots one time where I grabbed the friend of mine had a 72-inch Brilliant seeder that people carry around and do all these lawn projects with. So I went and did some alfalfa plots one day. And when I got there, I took the log chain that was used to bind it to the trailer, and I hooked one hook on one side and the other hook on the other side. And I just let that chain kind of tumble behind the drill.
Mm-hmm.
I'm telling you, it was beautiful because just that little tumbling action covered up a few more of those seeds, but yet it didn't really stir anything. It just kind of gave it a nice little coat. So I really liked how that looked, but I have not gotten anyone talked into doing that to their 30-foot Brilliant drill yet and being successful because I think it would be awesome. But so firm seed bed, get everything in the ground. Again, we have guys using Brilliants, N-gate seeders, blowing it on with a Terrigator and fertilizer, the traditional old press drill, and again, the no-till drill because we have depth bands and we can go through some residue. We haven't talked about no-till, but again, most of those fields are fairly firm anyway, so no-till drills work beautiful even on regular conventionally tilled ground that's been firmed up. So,
And that's actually my plan for this year is
I love it.
to go we're actually going to, because the field's rougher than a cob, we're going to we dissed it last fall. It's been out 2 years. We're going to go through with a cultivator, not real deep because you don't want to put deep ruts, like deep bumps in your field versus I want shallow bumps, because then I can take that out with that cultipacker. And as I'm running, if I have a field that I'm going to run east and west, as I'm doing that cultivation, I'll run it exactly east and west. That's the direction that I'm going to harvest, right? That's really, really important. If you're doing any kind of tillage, pick the direction that you're going to be harvesting, so you're not bumping across the field for the next 10 years, 7 years, 5 years, wherever you're at, right? It's entirely possible that my fields go 10 years.
Depends on the geography.
Because we're only doing 2 cuttings. And
correct.
I don't know, 16 cuttings, 20 cuttings is inside of reality, right?
Oh, absolutely. I've been going through that conversation with a lot of people lately too, and I think it's somewhere between 20 and 24 is the magic number.
Interesting. So we're doing 2 or maybe 3 cuttings.
You're still going to rotate in 5 years. Basically, I'm going to ask you to.
Okay. I'll support the seed sale industry. But as I'm thinking about how to get a field smooth, we're going to go through with that cultivator relatively shallow, 4 inches in my mind is good enough, and then come back with that Bearcat and hit it twice with moisture in the soil. One of the other things I'm really focusing on is once I start disturbing the soil, I'm coming right back in on it. Once we start that cultivator, we will not stop running tractors until the seed is in the ground and it's been packed once more.
So it doesn't all evaporate on you and you lose all that extra moisture. That's not a bad plan.
That's exactly it. So we're at these fields that I have in my mind that I'm planting this spring, we're going to plant them exactly east and west. So I'm going to set the GPS to run, let's see here, 90 and 270, right? Mm-hmm. And that's where the cultivator is going to go. That cultimulcher, that cultipacker, I'm going to set 5 degrees off.
Sure.
Of 90, so I'm going to run it like 95 and 275, and then I'm going to come back and go 5 degrees the other way off of east-west and do a little bit of an X. And that's my methodology for smoothing out a field as I'm packing.
Very good. And then you come plant straight, and so you can see where you have a GPS. I'm still using a dang fence post and a telephone pole for my GPS unit. So
don't get too envious of me. I'm running a Raven Cruiser 2 chasing a red line, which is like the height of early 90s technology, right?
Right, exactly.
So nothing fancy, just something to keep you on a straight line. And then, the plan is to pack it, to cultivate it, then pack it 2 different directions, and then come back in with my 750 no-till drill, and we're gonna set it to run about 1/4 inch deep. That's what I'm shooting for, and that has that good press wheel that'll probably push it down into that 3/8 to 1/2 inch kind of zone.
Right.
And then there's a closing wheel behind that.
Absolutely. So yes, that's another key piece, is to make sure that you have some kind of closing or packing mechanism after it's planted to get, again, good seed to soil contact, because you've just run a coulter through there to open it up a bit and you've loosened some of that ground. So now let's firm it up again.
Now, all that to say,
absolutely,
if there's a week of rain in the forecast, rather a week of warm rain in the forecast, as I'm looking at putting seed in the ground, I might cheat and do it a different way. But if there's any chance that it's going to be dry, it's going in with a drill now.
Absolutely. No, I 100% agree with that. So, guys, I'm still a brilliant lover. There's just days where I'm not a brilliant lover. So most of the time I am. Only on replant days when I don't really like it. But
well, and it all has to do with that moisture. And the reason that I'm starting with the thought process of a drill is to get it down to a consistent depth. I don't want to see any seed, but I also don't want it to be 1 inch deep, right? So that's the battle that I'm fighting.
And I think most people that follow one of those drills for very long are going to say that you need to see a few seeds on top of the ground intermittently once in a while, or you could be too deep. Yes.
Gotcha.
But
well, that's good.
Seeing very many is not my favorite.
And then I'll assess afterwards if I'm happy with the initial packing, with those 2 packing passes. And then one of the reasons I like that no-till is because of the depth control. I mean, I'm not using anything fancy and new. We're not talking about seed singulation. I'm talking about chasing a red line on a GPS. We're not doing anything that's unattainable by regular people. But I do like that 750 no-till for the depth control and the packing after that you get immediately after the seed goes in the ground.
Yes. I would have to tell you that my drilling enterprise consists of, one of those cultimulters with 2 gangs of discs and the teeth in between, depending on which part of the world you are, whatever they call them out there, and a drill that's probably as old as I am. It's a 5100 International Press drill, and I have the grass seed attachment or the small seed attachment on the front. I literally run 12 pounds through the big box in the row in a furrow, and I run 12 pounds out the small seed attachment with no tubes on it, and it just goes everywhere. And then I come back with my cultipacker afterwards
and hit it again.
So I'm basically seeding it 2 ways at the same time. So when I said that I'm crabby with the Brilliant guy, I'm almost doing the same thing with half my seed. But I'm gonna stir it up a little bit with the row units as it goes by, and then I'm gonna hit it with 2 cultipackers.
And again, that's just like we're talking about, getting that firm seed bed. That
it is.
You cannot underscore firm seed bed enough. Maybe
is there a chance that we mentioned that maybe once or twice today?
You told me that you do this regularly. Firm seed bed. If
anybody takes anything away today, Jeff and John talked about firm seed beds and reducing your impact of a poor stand establishment. So big things. Something that we didn't talk about, but I'm going to toss it in here quick, about planting alfalfa and making sure you have a successful stand is pay attention to 2 things that are soil parameters again. And one would be the crop that you planted last year and what herbicides you used in that field, so you don't have any residual herbicide to give you a kick in the teeth when that alfalfa tries to germinate.
And you're talking about, if you're following corn, maybe there's some atrazine down, right? That would be a bad deal.
So you would have absolutely atrazine is one of them. You have stuff like Resicor, anything with any, the list is longer than I can even, there's like 45 different herbicides for corn and soybean that can have a residual impact on your alfalfa stand. And the list for small grains is probably 15 or so. And they might range from, when you really look at it, 10 months to 2 cropping seasons. So depending on your rate, the soil texture
and rainfall,
pH, the rainfall, the organic matter, all of those goofy little things play an important impact on what happens to that chemistry once it's put on your field. So I just want to throw that out there again, that some of these things get overlooked. And I'm going to say it this way. Probably the worst part about that is if there's enough residue out there to take yield potential off but not kill it, you don't know.
Oh.
So I'd almost rather have a residual herbicide either nuke it or not hurt it at all. But what we can do is drastically hurt those root systems and damage that plant that will inhibit your yield for the next 5, 6, 7, 8 to 10 years, if you want to put it in those terms.
Right.
But we don't even know that it's happened because the whole field kind of looks the same. You might chalk it up and go, oh, well, it was dry this year. Maybe I got dinged by some weeds. Maybe there could be some herbicide damage that you don't even recognize. So that's the silent one that hurts me. And the other thing would be soil pH, folks. So make sure your soil pH is good.
Mm-hmm.
We love to have 6.8 to 7.2 and watch those residual herbicides. Otherwise, it's all about seed to soil contact, getting the right process in place to make sure that everything is in good order when the seed gets there, and doing a rain dance and having that be fairly predictable. That'd be great.
Well, with that, I'll say thanks, Jeff.
Absolutely.
This has been a wonderful conversation.
Well, thank you, everybody. I hope it treats you well, and you go get a good alfalfa seedling establishment taken care of this year, and we can talk about how cool it was later.
Thank you again for Cropland putting some money towards sponsoring the Hey Kings podcast. That's really what makes all of this possible. Thank you to our new sponsor, Krone. And for more information, visit Krone-NA, that's Krone North America, Krone-NA.com. Thank you to Nick Palmieri at Palmieri Sound for doing all of our audio editing. Thank you to Jessica Palmieri for doing all of our social media coordination.